What's up?
What's up? Play any new games lately?
Nah, man, nothing good out right now.
Yeah, man, I feel you.
Hey, I got an idea. Hello and welcome to Press Start the Pitch, the podcast where game ideas get powered up, broken down, and judged one pitch at a time. This is episode 4 of our podcast series, and my name is Joe.
I'm Chad.
Each week, one of us will pitch a brand new game concept, then we'll break it down, starting with the gameplay, the challenges, and whether people would actually buy it, and finally decide if we should sell it or shelve it. So let's get started with the pitch today. Take it away, Chad.
All right. So, episode 4, it's been a little while since we recorded the last one, but this one's, I think, is going to be a good one. I think everyone listening is going to enjoy it. I think Joe's going to enjoy it. But here we go. So, Joe, let me set the scene for you. I know we've been talking about a few different topics lately when we're not on here, but I know we talked about like some of the new RPGs that came out, like independent RPGs, like
Crimson Desert.
Crimson Desert. What's the Windrose?
Yeah, Windrose.
Survival.
Yeah.
So imagine an RPG, but kind of the genre specific, but imagine an RPG, but instead of sword fighting dragons, you have race cars, pit crews, and small town stuff.
Oh.
So again, like I said, it's dirt tracks, late night garage builds, small town rivalries, and the long road from a beat up starter car to trying to become a racing legend. Basically, the short pitch of the game is a semi open world racing RPG where reputation matters. Every driver can remember, and every Friday night under the lights feels like a battle for your future. So basically the idea I came from, and this is where the podcast is going to kick in. We're going to kind of break down the mechanics because I have a concept fleshed out, but not really the true deep mechanics. Is imagine starting in a small town. We'll say, take GTA, for example, right now for a control scheme, kind of the third person over, maybe it could be first person as well. It probably would be first person considering it's a racing game. You start out one guy, little bit of money, doing maybe odd jobs, and there's a small oval track in town, whether it be dirt, clay, asphalt, whatever, old rundown mom and pop track. I think of Cletus McFarland's track, Sarasota, before he bought it.
Yeah.
You got this old town thing. You're in a small rural town, maybe the Carolinas feel to it. And you go into this, you have a set amount of money, but the true depth of the game is the type of racing you can do. I'm not saying like necessarily have oval track, drag racing, stuff like that. I think the game would be focused mainly around like oval racing. So you start your money, but the cool thing about this game is I'm thinking the game takes place like 1990s into the early 2000s. Think pre-cash for clunkers. So you start out, you got the money, you pull up the map. It could have a little intro or something like that kind of walks you through the basic controls of the game, but you have to find a car. So you look up the local racetrack. They have, your like hobby stocks, your street stocks, going into like pro stocks, pure stocks, late models, whatever it is. All similar cars, but they have different things under the hood or how they're built or whatever like that. So you need to acquire a car. So how do you acquire a car? Well, you can get a newspaper, which I know is dating a little bit, or you can go like to junkyards, used car dealerships, whatever. You can have different points of interest on the map, similar to an RPG. You have different stores, but you can also find things like flea markets based off the day of the week. Someone might have a car in their yard, like an old rust bucket. Maybe you can interact with the person there and you could be like, hey, I'm interested in your car. You can kind of have, I don't think the RPG aspect would need to have like a skill system where you have like, negotiation skills, stuff like that. I don't think it needs to be that. Maybe, there's a chance when you negotiate, maybe you can get a perk where it increases your chance of successful negotiation, something simple. But you can negotiate, and you have to get you basically a junker to start out with. Maybe you work at a small mechanic in town, garage or something. You borrow the shop's tow truck to go pick up a car and drag it back to start building it into a race car. So you get back to the shop. From there, you got to turn it into a race car. So this is where it kind of gets cool again, is we're kind of, mixing games at this point. But think of like Car Mechanic Sim or My Summer Car or something like that. Maybe not as intense as some of those are, but I think it'd be cool to have not just engine upgrade 1, engine upgrade 2, but like you can build the motor on a stand if you want. Like you can find like a junkyard block, slap some basic pistons in it, stuff like that. Maybe you get lucky, find like a high-rise intake or something like that. And you're like, oh yeah, that's what I need. You find one in a swap shop or something like that fits your motor. And you put together this motor, put it in the car, knock your glass out, throw a roll cage in it. Maybe there's some way to build a roll cage, or you have to acquire one that fits your car. Maybe you find a kit and it bolts together or something like that in the car. But it's simple. You go out to the track and you go to race, but you got to go out, you got to sign up for a class, you got to pass tech with whatever requirements the class has for that track. If your car meets those requirements, you can run the race. And I think you could really get into like maybe trying to bend the rules, like trying to sneak a part on or something like that. Maybe some better pistons, maybe they won't look that hard that time, things like that. And you start building a reputation. And I think as for like the level design, I think the tracks should be done really well. Like I think the ovals should look good, feel good. The driving should feel good, but I don't think we quite need to go to an iRacing level of physics. I think kind of make it a little bit more arcade-ish, but still feels good. The cars feel heavy. You slide, get good things like that. But as for the actual level design, I think you have kind of a small town or surrounding area around the town. And then maybe there's a couple tracks that are kind of in the region that you're playing in, which is the open world thing. And it's, rural North Carolina or something. So you don't have to have like high density cities or anything like that. But if you want to go on the road, like the different tracks outside of your town area, you can get on the freeway and it'll trigger like a point you drive to a certain extent, and it'll trigger the map. And then you can select which track you want to go from there. Then you're arriving at the gates, and you can pull into the track. But yeah, that's my start of my pitch, Joe.
Awesome.
So, questions, thoughts?
Yeah. Am I coming through on the mic?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. My thing didn't look like it was working. No, I think it's a good concept. I like the idea. You answered some of my questions I had written down. I was going to say, like, how do you start off? But you said, like, doing, mechanic work or whatever. I think a cool concept would be, like, maybe you're starting off as, like, a pit crewman on one of the teams or something. And then, like, I'm thinking, like, Talladega Nights style thing where, you're a pit crew guy. And maybe you get thrown in the seat for a race. And then, like, I don't know, it goes along with the story. Like, your guy's like, oh, I actually like racing. And then he's kind of got to work his way up or something like that. Maybe you get, you can either fund it yourself or you get like a little reputation or something, maybe jumping in you get hired by somebody to race or something like that would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple different paths. But, and then again, I was like, oh, it sounds a lot like the car stuff sounds a lot like My Summer Car or whatever, or like Mechanic Sim, where you have like options of working on your car in the first person aspect of things where you're actually moving parts and switching parts and stuff like that, and upgrading, I think would be awesome.
Yeah, because I think if you do it right, if you don't go down it's kind of cliche in this statement, but the nuts and bolts of like the car mechanic side where you're like bolting on each individual part, I think like you can go to your engine stand and put your block on there.
Yeah.
And then you can get the parts and assemble it. And, you don't know when you're this small shop basically operating out of your garage, you don't have the tech of like dynos or anything like that to even know how well your motor is going to run. And I think all the parts, and I think that's the depth of the game really is where I thought it'd be really cool is it, like when you look at games like NASCAR and iRacing, it's kind of like drop you in, you can adjust your settings on your car and you can race. But it feels very different. Like you add in the aspect where you can hunt parts out and like you check the newspaper or catalog, and even if you set it a bit more in the future and you like look it up online and you like stumble on a set of brand new or slightly used tires that are perfect for the car in your class, and you're running these like worn out tires that suck on grip, you're like super excited because you hit it. And I mean, I kind of think about it like this way, because My Winter Car, which is a sequel to My Summer Car, I played it a little bit. It's still development, but he added where you can go and pull up a newspaper ad and call the number, and the guy will sell you parts, and it'll be like, have a muffler, a clutch, and a bunch of random parts, and you don't know what you're getting in the order, and he's like $200. And you order this blind box of parts, and you don't know if anything in it's actually what you need.
Yeah.
And I think something like that, like when you go to the flea market or the swap meet or whatever, at once a month or once a week or something, you don't know what you're going to find. And I think you make the game in a way like, you go into like pure stock or street stock at a track, hobby stocks, even, like you can get into a car pretty easy. You're not going to need like these high end, like billet motor parts, or, you're not running like 850 cages and stuff like that. These high speed cages, you're not running super late models or anything like that. You're just trying to get a stock car. So you're thinking like these Monte Carlo or old, Grand Nationals or something like that, those type of like, what do they call them, F bodies or B bodies, Camaros and Firebirds and Mustangs and things like that, and you don't necessarily have to have like authentic brands to the car, but you can give them the looks something like Wreckfest or something has, where you can like, you know what it looks like. You're like, oh man, that's like an old Regal or a Monte Carlo. That'd be cool. And, if you had like hobby class, you could have like old like Honda Civics and, Escorts and whatever from the 4-cylinder. I mean, maybe you have to start out with that. But I think what you mentioned, though, is actually really cool, is like have different paths going into the game. Like maybe when you start the game, you can start as a mechanic at the local gas station or a pit crew member. But I think the pit crew you brought up is really good, because then you could essentially be forced into the tutorial that teaches you how the game works. Like
right.
Maybe it starts out with the, oh man, can I get you to throw the tires on the car before the race? The driver's like, can you help me out, put the tires on? And it teaches you kind of the basic mechanics of how to attach parts. And then something happens or whatever, and you get stuck behind the wheel. So you learn how to drive in the heats in the race. And maybe if you win the race, he gives you the prize money for helping him out, getting the points or whatever. And that kind of gives you your boost of money. I don't think he should give you the like super good car, but maybe he has an old junker behind his house that he'll let you have. That could work too for getting a frame. And so he's like, oh, I got this old car. I got a couple old cars behind the shop. You can pick one out for yourself if you want. And then you get, your classic 3-starter, like Need for Speed and all these old racing games used to do. Pick one of your 3 starters, it'd be like a hobby stock 4-cylinder, like a Monte Carlo, and then maybe a Camaro or something like that. One of the, the F body cars or something like that. And then you go from there.
Yeah. I think that's a good entryway in, because like you said, it's a little bit of a tutorial, but it also is like, you're starting off as this dude who doesn't really know what he's working on a pit crew. And then he's like, you get behind the wheel of the car. And then you're just like, oh, I actually really like this racing thing. And then you kind of branch out from there and start your career. And maybe it's not even in the same class, but like, you get that idea of like, oh, okay, I want to do racing. And then you get in and, start your car, and then you start doing the whole thing. And I also like the idea too of, starting off, like obviously you're going to be getting the bare minimum stuff, right? The used parts or the cheaper parts, and you're getting them from swap meets. But then like maybe later on in the game, after you've gained some notoriety and like, you're starting to race in higher end classes, obviously the sponsorships are going to come in. Yep. And then that's when you start switching from like buying your parts at the swap meet to like, okay, now I got a sponsor for this. We're going to get good parts, and you actually start developing a full racing team and stuff like that. And I mean, I don't know where you'd end the kind of top tier racing, whether it be like a NASCAR style racing or whatever you want to make. Yeah. And then that's when you start getting into I got signed by a team. It's very much, it's kind of a weird correlation, but not really at the same time. But like if you play those like Madden games or NBA 2K, when you do your whole career thing, you start off in high school or college or whatever, and then you start working up, you get drafted in. It's kind of the same thing along those lines.
And I think it would be cool that I add that, because I think you mentioned it earlier, and then I kind of had it in my mind too, is like the path of the game. I think is the adventure quote of the game is, do you want to go the route of being a team owner, like build your team, or do you want to just be a driver and just work your reputation up and get put into better cars and better teams, and they just pay you? And I mean, the only problem with like being like a player moving up hot seating into different teams is you'll make money, but what are you going to spend your money on? I mean, I'm sure we'll have like the small open world elements. So you could have like personal cars and stuff or whatever, which would be like little trophies. But I mean, you know, if you're doing a team owner, then obviously your money's going back into your team or your cars or whatever like that. I mean, that would be the only potential hurdle you would have to figure out in the concept. Because I think it would be cool to have that option. But I mean, you could look at something like was it a NASCAR game? One of the racing games that came out a while back had that where you could, I think it was one of the dirt track games actually, is you had your car that you were running like a street stock or something like that, but occasionally you'd get offers from teams to hot seat a race in a higher class. So you'd be like run a really good street stock, and then you'd get a call and someone would be like, hey, can you run this late model for me this week? I'll pay you X to drive a late model. And you go out and they're like, their expectation is for you to run like 7th or higher. And so you got to go out and do that. And that'll give you more time to get used to those cars and how they run. But at the same time, you'll get a nice chunk of cash if you do really well. And that can go back into your own team. And I think maybe something like that, because I feel like the core of the game is going to be around building your cars up. If you want to be a solo driver, great. If you want to build a team, I think the NPC like element should be there where you can hire, you know, pit crew members when you get in the races where you actually need a pit crew. But like, you know, the first person you want to hire is you want to hire a crew chief. And then maybe I think what would be cool with it is like you can expand your shop. So like you start out in like your garage or the back of a property or something, building under a tarp for all you know. And, you know, your limitations are high with what you can actually do to the car. You can slap parts on, but if you don't have a welding station or whatever, you can't really weld stuff to the car. But, you know, eventually you get into a shop, you can afford a lift. You build a lift in your shop. So now you get your car in the air. You don't have to use a jack or whatever. And so you can start doing better work underneath the car. And I think that's where you get it too, is like maybe you develop to the point like you get a framing jig. Like you get a shop big enough, you can put a framing rack in and jig frames from scratch. And like you hire a crew chief that can build frames. And maybe you don't directly build your frames, but maybe it's like again, like RPGs where you have like a passive mission going on where like you assign one of your crew to a mission. So you assign Joe Bob, the fucking frame guy, to build a frame, and it might take him 2 weeks to build a frame, but you'll have a brand new frame at the end of 2 weeks that you can use for a future track. And I think with the whole tuning, building parts aspect of the game, I think that'll be really cool too, because then you get in like the NASCAR level of like, you start planning like, okay, this is going to be my super speedway car. This is going to be my short track car. And you start building these cars designed for their tracks, which is what's going to give you the advantage. They drive better, they handle better. And then, you know, I think management of like your team is important. You obviously got to pay them maybe early on, like your first crew chief's your buddy and you don't have to pay him because he's your friend, but he's limited in what he can do. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think I like that idea of just having the different, I mean, it's kind of like what other games do with, you know, you can hire a crew chief, but here's what he's strong at. And here's, you know, here's his weaknesses. And another guy may be more expensive and he's going to have less weaknesses, more strength. And, you know, and then it just plays a factor into like how you perform on race day in some way, like, or, you know, I think it should all trickle down. Like if you have a good crew chief, you're going to have a better pit crew kind of. Maybe he buffs the pit crew, or certain crew chief buffs like the mechanics or the engineers when you get to that level and stuff like that. I think they should all have like kind of their perks and maybe drawbacks and stuff like that. And then I would say even over time, if you're like running with the same crew of guys, you can like maybe put skill points into them, or they they level up over time, and then they, you know, you can just slowly grow with the people you have. And then obviously, like, as you grow up, like, you're going to have team offers and stuff like that, certain team's going to pay you X amount for this season. And, then it can directly you can buff things up in your team. And I don't know. And then having like that kind of media thing that those games have would be cool too. Like, as you start getting up, like, you're going to have media stuff, sponsorships and stuff like that you can do events for and everything.
Yeah. And I think it would be cool too, because like what you're saying with the skill points and stuff, like, I think a lot of it's going to be about like the customization, how you want to build out your team. So like, once you get a little bit of money and can build into a property, maybe you rent like a warehouse instead of a little garage. And so then you can start getting like, like your racks and your, what do they call it? The surface plates or whatever to start building your car. And, like that'll buff setting up your car for the week. If you have, the perfect level surface plate to set your car on and let your crew work on that car during the week. And I kind of think like maybe like the Formula One games, they have like a owner mode where you can run your team. And so like, during the week with those, and it's very similar kind of to the career concept we're discussing, like owning a team, is you have tasks you can assign between races. So you can be like, hey, I just built a training room on my campus. It's got, desk or whatever where the guys can hang out and have, share films or work on stuff. And maybe you assign your pit crew that week to work with the crew chief in there, and it takes them out of commission for the week. They can't work on other stuff, but by the end of the training process for that week, they have 5% gain on tire change, or 2% drop in overall time on pit stops and things like that. So when you get into like the actual like oval track, like NASCAR-esque racing, that's when that you need that little being. You're like, man, we're really slow on changing tires. We really need to focus the pit crew on training up on tires. And then, your pit crew will progress over time. But obviously, if you fire someone for whatever reason, you lose their benefits. You bring someone in, they might be better, but you might lose whatever you trained into someone else.
Right. Yeah. I think Madden does something like that too. Like, where I think it might just go for your character. It may go for the team. I can't remember. But like, if you're in the career mode, obviously like the week that you're in training before the game, you have like opportunities to go obviously do like your PR events, but then you have like practices that you can go to, and that's going to like boost your player stats and stuff like that. And I think essentially you could do the same thing for this, is where like you could have, say Monday comes around and it's like, okay, we can either like study the race film and see where you do. And that's going to like increase your drivers, like overall, like, like maybe it increases like racecraft or something like that gives you a better percentage in something. And then the next day you can pick from like 3 others that's like, okay, we're going to work on pit crew stops, or we're going to do some R&D or work with the engineers. And then it's like you're kind of boosting things as you go, and it's not like necessarily, maybe it's like a timed event where like it's going to take your crew a week to practice pit stops, but then at the end of the week, and by the time the next race hits, you're going to have like a 50% increase in your pit crew speed or whatever, however that, you would want to put it out there kind of.
Now, the interesting thing with that is like, how, I guess, in depth should a NPC be? Like, should we have like, obviously we'd have the skill set of it. Like Joe Bob's a pit crew member. He has skills in tire changing, gas canning, whatever, impact gun, whatever. That's the skill. And he'll have all the skill available to do whatever, but he'll be more proficient in one than the others. Like, you'll assign your pit crew based off of how you hire them. So like, if you find a guy in the, we'll say employee market for now, however you acquire said members, then, well, he's got a level 3 in, wheel gun. So I'm going to bring him onto my team, throw him on the wheel, wheel 1 or, left front, left rear, wherever, because the other guy has 0. He's fumbling the gun, and half the time he makes a mistake and kills my pit stop.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool in the aspect of like, because it's the management. You're going to be, rotating. When you start out, you're going to have what you have. And I think as you get further, maybe you can hire an HR person eventually and they'll automatically look for drivers based off of what you're looking for. Like you can go to your HR person and be like, I'm looking for a wheel gun guy or a jack guy or something, or I need a new mechanic or engineer, and they'll focus. And then whatever way you get your employee market where you look at your new things, then they'll be more focused. So you want to have an HR on staff if you can afford it. And, the during the week thing, like you brought up like a presser or something like that, where you got to do a press. I think that should be a big aspect of the game, like sponsors. Like when you acquire a sponsor, they'll be like, they have these needs. They want you to have like one press meet a month at, Hardee's fast food restaurant in the town. You got to one day a month, you got to go over there, bring your car out there, set it up and do the little meet and greet.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it, the sponsor will be disappointed in you. They may not drop you, but it'll debuff them slightly or something, or they'll be upset and you'll have less of a chance of renegotiating your contract at the end of the season or at the end of the how many ever races. Because I think you start out, maybe you can only, the sponsors you find is like Joe Bob's Garage, and he only can afford to sponsor you for one event. Right, but if you do really well and make him happy, he might try and find the money to sponsor you again.
Yeah, or it allows you to start drawing from a pool of better sponsors or something like that. But
I agree.
Yeah, I like that idea because if you're doing sponsors, like you get to pick like everything else. Like, oh, somebody comes at you with this sponsor deal, they're going to sponsor you for 5 races. Another guy may sponsor you for 10 races, but he's going to pay you a little less, or however it works out. And then I like them if they gave you like some sort of buff maybe or something like that, or maybe it's just a money thing. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And then same thing with the crew members. I like how if you start off, you're only going to get access to kind of the lower tier people. As you work your way up, maybe you start like, oh, this guy was a good like a pit crew member for such and such racing.
Yeah.
And he's now we're trying to pick him up, and he's going to give you like, maybe you have some crew members that you just have like regular skills and stuff that they buff, but then maybe you get like legendary crew members or something like that you can pick out.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, and then like they're going to speed your pit stops up by like 2 seconds or whatever.
Find your Robert Duvall for your chassis builder.
Yeah, exactly. Then you start getting into like these big name chassis builders and stuff like that, or good crew chiefs that start making your race strategy better and that make better calls and stuff like that.
I think so. I think that would be a cool aspect. Like when you get into spotter racing, is maybe your skill of your spotter actually affects your calls when you're in the car.
Yeah. Like
maybe his timing, because it'd be super easy to code in. It's like his timing would be off if he's worse at it. It's like when he says there's a car or you're clear above you, maybe he's a quarter of a second off one time and you go up and there's a car there and he's like, my bad. And you're ready to go in the pits and knock him out. But that kind of gets me to the next point, which is, so we kind of agree that there's going to be a lot of it's going to be like crew management stuff. Again, it's the RPG element, is you're managing all these aspects of a race team. Are we going to introduce where, and I kind of think this will probably be a gimme, but it's going to lead into the second point, is a second driver. Like, can you hire drivers to drive your car once you have the means? So like once you have a second car, if you have the means to field that second car, should you be able to hire a driver to put in that car? And then he'd just race like an NPC on the weekends.
Yeah, I think so. And I think with each of these things, like I think with any NPC character in the game, if you hire them, you should have the ability, in whether it's money or time or whatever, like you have the ability to like train them. So whether it be like practice days or, stuff throughout the week, like you can hire an NPC driver and he may have good driving skill, but then you can like throw some money into it. And obviously when you get higher level, maybe you get racing simulators. You can tell that driver like, hey, you need to go spend X amount of hours.
I agree.
Obviously it's going to cost X amount of money, but like then his driving skill gets better. So then you have a better teammate out there. And, it's a lot of little things you can do, but you can like, you don't necessarily have to keep hiring, I think, better people. You can like just train the people that you have to get better.
I agree.
As you go.
And I think you kind of keep your staff or employees, however you want to call it, your NPCs, kind of free where you can reassign them. Yeah. So like you could pull like the Ricky Bobby again in reverse as like one of your pit crew, he's been there for a while. Maybe they have a loyalty meter. The longer they're there, maybe they naturally develop loyalty if you make them happy, and then they buff it. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm gonna throw him in my old street stock car and go let him race the oval on the weekend. Maybe he'll pick up a couple $100 in the main if he runs good. And you're like, he's not doing nothing else this week. And so then you also run into the option too of like, do I want to sell a car when I move on, or do I want to keep fielding that car in a different class? So like if I go from street stock to late model, do I want to keep that street stock or sell it for the money to use towards a late model, or do I want to keep fielding that street stock because it's a really good car that I built? And if I find a halfway decent driver, he's going to keep bringing money in on that car and I don't have to drive it.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of like the ATS, you hire drivers and put them in your own vehicles. And then
but I want to be able to see them.
For sure. I think you should be able to see them, obviously, if you're racing in the same class that they are. But then like, if you're racing in like, let's just say the Cup Series and they're racing like your ARCA car or whatever, however you want to, make the classes go up, like you're not going to necessarily see them because they're not in the same race, but they may like, if you simulate through a day or whatever, and it's like, oh, okay, such and such just won. He got third in the race and he won you this amount of money and your sponsors are happy. And then like, you can choose whether or not you want to move him up to a different class or whatever. Yeah. And, just kind of how you do it. And I would say even like you can hire drivers, like you said, hot seat in a car. Yeah. Be cool too. If you didn't want to like have a full-time driver, you could, you can just run the car, but hire a driver to go in. And maybe that's where you can hire drivers that are really good, and then they run your car. You would obviously have to pay them more, but then they could win you more money in the race by placing.
I think you could put out like, if you don't have a driver on staff, you put out like whatever the advertisement pool is be like, I need a driver for X for this weekend. Yeah. And then like you put like how much you're offering for the seat, how much you'll pay them to drive, and that increases the chance of, better drivers, or how many show up at potentially that'll offer the drive, how many call about the offering for that week. And I'm going to do the first ever thing on this podcast, but I think I'm going to call an audible on one of the early concepts of this game. I think we eliminate the free roam element to the map, the town map. And here's why. So the focus of the game, like as we've developed it, and that's kind of the point of the podcast, is it feels like it's more of a focus on like assignments. Like you have your part where, you can race. That's the thing, is you can work on cars and you can race. We're not removing that element at all. But I feel like the free roam kind of is unnecessary at this point. I think you should have a regional map, like a town map, regional map, national map that you can load up, and you can go like in your town, you can travel whatever, if it's within business hours. Cause I think the clock should move throughout the day, but you should have the ability to skip time if you want, or pass time and simulate time or whatever. But like, if you want to go to a junkyard in your town, you pop up the town map, you click, go to the junkyard, you can go to the junkyard and look at the parts, and then you can walk around, look at cars, stuff like that. Same thing with the parts stores. And then, if you develop a good relationship with the, O'Filey's Auto Parts in town, then you can call them on your phone and be like, hey, I need a muffler for this, or a piston for this, or whatever. And they'll deliver it once your relationship's good. And that way, at the same time, it's going to vastly reduce your difficulty in developing the game. You don't need to create an open world driving element.
Yeah.
But then what I was thinking about is, this is where it kind of popped up for the audible, is now you got to get your car to the track though. And so this was where I kind of thought about it while you were discussing the elements that you were discussing about. Like, originally my idea was, like you could get like a pickup truck with a trailer, or, a rollback type truck and haul your car there. But what if instead of that, like you can buy a truck or whatever, and either you can drive it, so you go like, I'm going to go to Eldora this weekend. I'm just using for a easy track idea. It's like, I'm going to go to Eldora. I'm going to take the F-150 in my garage with the trailer, and I'll drive it there. But like, maybe it affects your stamina for the weekend or something like that. But once you get your team built up, maybe you assign one of your pit crew guys to drive the truck.
Right.
And he drives it there, reduces your stamina loss or whatever it might affect. But then what I was getting to is, so as you develop your team, you go from, a single car trailer to a box trailer that can hold 2 cars. So then you can bring 2 cars to Eldora. You can bring a street stock and a late model because you have the room for it. Or if you want to run 2 different trucks, you can. You just have to have 2 drivers. You can't drive both of them. But what that would do though is, one, it allows us to create more tracks overall. You can have a lot more tracks on the map because the open world aspect kind of limits how many tracks. You can't have a bunch of tracks next to each other. It looks stupid. But then when you get into that multi-team thing, so like you can send, Joe Bob, your street stock driver, to Eldora this weekend, and you're going down the Talladega, and their weekend will simulate. Maybe you can watch it if you want. There's an option where you can watch the actual race if you want, but it would simulate most of the stuff of the weekend and then give you the results and how he did. And then your weekend would be focused at Talladega, where you're physically interacting with everything while he's in the background doing his thing with whatever crew is helping him, or however you work like that. So then you kind of get into this wider world. And obviously, like you said, if both of you go to the same track and you're running like ARCA and Cup, then maybe you can watch his race. You can choose to watch or simulate his race, or you can just go to your race and ignore his stuff for the weekend.
Right.
And it makes it kind of simple. But then you get into the cool thing too, is we're like, okay, now we're not at the shop anymore. We're at the track. Now we got weekend management. So now when you're a small team, your pit crew might go the 2 races. Your ARCA pit crew might work the Cup race too, because you don't have enough money to field a second pit crew. And so you bring your good jack guys over, or maybe, there's a chance for like shakeups or something. Maybe you can have something happen to a pit crew, like he gets sick or hurt or something like that. So like, oh crap, I lost my jack man for ARCA. And then you pull your guy from the Cup team to help the ARCA race because it comes before, and he covers that for the week. And then you bring him back, but maybe his stamina's hurt from it because he's running 2 races. And, from there, but then, you can obviously, and then, late term development in the game, you can add, packs, more tracks, more car classes, things like that. You could really expand. And I mean, I know I said it initially, but like you could even get into like drag racing and stuff. And it's the way this concept is. You could pull a Tony Stewart and build a drag team. Maybe a future DLC is a drag DLC that adds drag tracks, drag cars, and the core mechanic of the game is the same with the motors and the maintenance and everything. It's just slightly different. You can still field the cars from your shop. You would just have different stations or tools or whatever that you need to do it. Your frame building's not going to be the same as stock cars. And, you get into things like that. And I think that could be a really cool, like, expansion on the game.
Oh, yeah. And I like the idea, too, that's like every choice you make, like, is going to impact your crew's performance through the week. Like you said, if you don't have a driver, if you drive, then you're going to be like tired for the race. Yeah. But if you have like a pit crew guy drive, then maybe your pit stops suffer a little bit from it. Maybe he makes a mistake or whatever, something like that. So there's like a bunch of different options that you can do just to kind of make it kind of makes the game like where you're just always striving to be like, I need to hire somebody new. I need to do this. I need to, and then ultimately you should be like a well-oiled machine by the end.
Because I think
you're working the bigger races.
I think it's really going to appeal to the micromanagement people that like the little micromanagement thing. And I like the racing concept because I think the racing should feel good. But I mean, if we're eliminating the free roam element, we can strive closer to an iRacing feel too for the actual physics.
Yeah, that's what my next question was going to be like how, like, obviously I think with any driving game, the focus should be primarily on the driving aspect of it. Like, so is it going to be like full pit stops? Like basically when you're on race day, are you like doing everything, or is it going to be like simulated pit stops like they do in 25 now?
I think he should do everything. Like, your guys are in the stop. Obviously the models, you could make it where the models change slightly based off the quote NPC mesh, but the animations and everything would be the same, but like you have to manage it. Like you're not just going in on a cutscene and pulling out. I think it really has to be, that's a part of the thing. You've spent all this work during the week making this well-oiled pit crew, and you're going to, take half a second off of everyone else because you have this perfect pit crew. You should be able to experience that. And then if something happens, I think a big part of the game is, like I said, these shakeups or oopses or errors or things that can come into play. If your guy's just a little bit too tired, maybe he slips up in a bad lug nut and your wheel comes off the next turn.
Yeah.
I mean, it shouldn't happen a lot, but the very rare chance, if you line up all the bad factors at once, something bad could happen to the car.
Yeah.
And, you may go through all the trouble during the week and not pass tech for all you know. And then you got to deal with like fielding from the back. Like you qualify pole, go to tech, and then they're like, nope, to the back of the field. And then you got to deal with that hurdle on the weekend. Or, you know, your crew chief got drunk last night, came to the track and flipped off an official, and he's kicked out for the weekend. And things like that, just little random things that you really don't have control over other than just paying attention to your guys. And I think that really kind of adds, like, it's not just get behind the wheel, drive laps, and finish the race. Like, things can happen, which kind of gets me to my original second point that I was going to get to before I pulled that audible on the free roam, is I think reputation and relationships with teams, drivers, and everything should be important to the game. I think there should be a dynamic there. Like, you should be able to essentially, like, if you're racing one guy in a class and you're bumping into him a lot, or you and him are constantly fighting for whatever position, maybe a rivalry develops between you, or a feud. And so you can have that. You can have bad relationships with teams. Maybe the last race you wrecked out one of their guys, and so it hurts your reputation with them. And, you know, you can get into positive relationships too, where you know, if you're in a drafting style race, like a speedway race, you know, if you get, you know, team A don't like you, but team C does, team C gets behind you, they go into a train with you and push you up towards the front because they like you. But right. A is going to try and, you know, side draft you and bump you off the track if he gets the chance because he's angry at you for whatever you did. And I think back with the crew management is your relationships, is I think all the teams, and this was kind of what you brought up with like the legendary like crew members and stuff, which would be a really cool dynamic to have, like these really unique crew members, like a Downforce Danny type or something like that. And like, you can poach guys from other teams if you try hard enough. Like, maybe there's a way, like, you can reach out to a guy at the race week, and when you're walking around between races, maybe give you a little window where you can kind of walk around. When you're ready to go, you go to your car, interact with it, and it moves to the next step. So like, you can go around and like RPG style, like talk to NPCs at the track, like in the infield. And like, you can just go be like, hey, what's up, or whatever. And like, you can maybe, like, you hear a rumor, maybe you get like a rumor mill message or something like that. Like, so-and-so's unhappy with their team, is the word on the street. And you go talk to them at the event, and you know, they're a decent driver, they field well. And you're like, hey man, I'll offer you 5,000 more than them to come and race for me, or come and work for me. And then the next thing you know, they're over on your team, and that team hates you now. And you don't want to get into a rubbing contest with them on the track.
Right.
But, and then, you know, maybe they'll scoop a sponsor from you that you were looking at or negotiating with. And I think those kind of like just interesting little things could really make it really interesting how you play it. Because I feel like then it would feel like a living world, is like, because like you said about like NASCAR 25, the biggest problem with it is it doesn't feel natural when you're driving, because everything's like cut scened or auto directed or whatever, and it kills it.
Right. Like, you go to caution and it's just like, oh, they take control of your car, and then like, it's just kind of boring in that. Or, oh, I'm going to pit this lap, and then it's like, I pitted, but now I'm back on the pace lap again. And like, I don't know, I feel like those aspects should be focused onto just kind of that iRacing style of racing, where you feel like you're in the race, like you're immersed in it more, rather than just like, I'm playing a simulator, or like not a simulator, but just like I'm playing like an arcadey race. I think the racing should be focused a bit more.
I do too. I agree. It should definitely feel like you're actually in, and like, I want you to feel a part of the race weekend, not just the individual race. Like, where, you know, we talk about it in other games, but like the sound engineering is going to be important. How the cars sound and react. Like, if you change your exhaust, like go to an X-pipe exhaust on a car, it should sound distinctly different when you field the car. And I think, like, I mean, this would be the first game for it really, but like the voiceovers in it would be so important, as you want just different voiceovers and, you know, different sounds on the radio, not the same generic spotter noise over and over. Like, maybe, you know, have a bunch of voiceover recorded with just comments. So like, if your crew's running good and everything, you're hearing more of a like positive feedback and everything like that. Or, you know, if something goes wrong on a pit stop, they're like, yeah, you know, Jackman B messed up or whatever, and we're going to have a talk with them after the race type deal. And then you kind of hear the response of what happened without actually looking at a menu or something while you're driving. Yeah. You know, if you're in first person in the car, you don't know what's going on while your thing's being delayed. Hearing that feedback in your ear from your spotter or your crew chief is going to be important. So you're like, well, shit, I might fire him after the race at this rate because he might have just cost me the race.
Well, and this is kind of an interesting concept here, but I've seen games use it more recently. Fortnite actually being an example of it, which is a wild tie-in. But since we're in the age of AI, Fortnite, and I don't know if it's still in there, they had like a Star Wars theme going on, and you could like recruit Darth Vader as like one of your team members, basically, and he would follow you around. Well, with the AI, you could talk to him and he would like give you answers back of like what you were asking. So you could just be like, hey, what is this? Or use like real names. So I'm like thinking, what if you could incorporate some sort of AI in there with like your spotters on the race where you could actually really like talk to them, or you could talk to your crew chief through like the in-game voice and be like, car's really, really tight here. And like, you know, that would trigger something in the way he would make adjustments rather than you getting like a menu. Yeah. You're like, I need to do this. Like you could tell the actual crew chief, like, hey, I'm getting really loose in turns 1 and 2. Like we need to tighten it up for that. And then the game would make adjustments accordingly.
Yeah, or turns a wedge or whatever they call it out the
right.
back.
So it'd feel more alive where you could actually talk to your spotter and stuff like that. And obviously it would have to be worked with AI, but like,
yeah,
you know, where you could have more of a conversation and they would come back with like answers that were kind of around what you're talking about would be kind of cool.
I think that would be cool too, because especially if you have, you know, a key that you can simply key up for the radio and be like, hey, I need to come in for 2 lefts or, you know, change my outsides or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I think the game would, you know, give you feedback, maybe a little pop up in the corner, just acknowledging what it reads. You know, he'd read it back to you with whatever voice, right, whether it be an AI generator or an actual voiceover, but it pops up and it's like requesting 2 tire change outside or whatever, however it's phrased. And then you just acknowledge it just to be like, yeah, read back good. And that way it doesn't screw up on you.
Yeah.
But I think AI though would help with the actual like developing, like generating employees and stuff like that for the pools.
Yeah.
Because you could feed it, you know, criteria of what you want it to generate on a weekly basis. And it could generate new guys with new names and pictures or whatever. Like most of your time you see your crew, you know, their facial structure is going to be either covered by a helmet or something like that, or that, you know, looks aren't so much the difference. It'd be cool to have different facial meshes, but the body types could stay relatively the same. But you got to have some plump crew chiefs. You got to have a frame guy that's like 350 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
he's really good, though, but he doesn't actually do the work. He just stands there and supervises.
Yeah. I just think it would be funny just depending on who you get in the game, like as your crew chief, like if you're trying to talk to them and they actually like talk back with a relevant conversation of what you're asking them. If they like, you know, sometimes they would fight you on something. Maybe you're like, I think we need to make this adjustment. And they're like, nope, we're sticking to this strategy or whatever. Yeah. It just like would add some more realism to the game, which would be kind of funny.
Now think about this, because we're going to go on to this and then we'll go on to the last, I think, point is, so with your NPC drivers, can you crew chief for them? Could you actually spectate? And if we're talking about, say we enable this AI concept of, if your crew chief can interact with you, why can't you interact with a driver as a crew chief?
Right.
And be like, how's the car feeling? And then you could actually spot a race if you want to, which would be cool to have the option to do once if it worked well. And so you could be like coaching your guy in and you'd be like, we're going to bring you in for 2 tires. You're looking rough on the outside. You're starting to slip the track or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in reality, you should be able to do, you know, any position really in the thing. I mean, I think the crew chiefing or the spotting or whatever, just depending on what people you have for a team.
Yeah.
I mean, from a development standpoint, it might make it a nightmare in a sense. Like you have to kind of add in user interface for all of these things. But I think in the end result of the game, it would be really nice just to have like all these different options of what you can do. Like you can be a driver, you can be a crew chief, you can be a spotter, whatever, and like just kind of go into any aspect of racing. Really, I think it would be really cool to do that, actually.
Because the way it feels like right now is how we've developed it, kind of from an open world RPG, which was my original idea, but into more of a management racing game.
Yeah.
It kind of takes some nods from like Formula One. The Formula One owner mode's kind of similar to this in a sense, not a lot like it. But you have to manage like your financials and your engineering and development, but it's very basic menu system. But I mean, this game feels like with the way we've developed it, you could even act as just an owner role once you get through the first races and just simulate everything. So if people want to play just a racing simulator, team management racing simulator, they don't even have to get in the car. And that kind of opens up the audience because some people like that, where they're just number managing, crunching numbers, trying to get the best numbers on the guys. And they can, of course, spectate the race and watch the NPCs do it. And that part's not so hard as long as you get the AI programmed right for the pathfinding and everything like that, is they'll drive fine. And I think it's developing that attachment to your things. Now, the last thing I want to get into before we wrap it is a multiplayer potentially.
I was going to bring that up too. And I was going to ask you how you felt about that.
So I think you would have to do it like Madden or WWE or Formula One or whatever, where you have basically a league of sorts. Is you have, and I think that's the only way you could really do it easy. I mean, we could discuss it in multiplayer another hour. That's a whole tangent, but like basic multiplayer, if it was possible, would be you run the week as your team at your shop or whatever, and then on the weekend is where you run into everyone. So you have like a multiplayer mode where like you can work your crew during the week once everyone's done with their thing. WWE does a real good way about it. Is you'd have to have like a condensed week mode where you basically you assign tasks for your team, you set what's going to be done during the week, then you finish that, then it goes, once everyone has a turn of doing that, then it goes to the actual weekend. And then that's where you would have your qualifying and your races and everything like that. But it would be really cool though, because then you would have your uniqueness to your teams, how your team develops versus another team. It's not just running a bunch of same tune cars. Is you're going to have different teams with different personalities and styles, and they're all converging on the weekend. So, you know, your team might be better at pitting, but my team's better on the turns. And so you're going to have that thing where, you know, this car's faster on the straights, but they have real trouble in the corners on this tri-oval. And then the other team, you know, might be better on the corners, but their car doesn't have the top end that the other ones have. So your short tracks, you know, are going to be their bread and butter, but the super speedways or the large tracks they're going to struggle with because they just don't have that top end. So they're going to be like, you know, midfield, backfield, struggling, riding the drafts, hoping to keep up. And then you could also get into like parts trading and stuff like that, where you can be like, hey, I got an engine you might want. I see you got a suspension set I need, some springs.
Right.
And you could be making trades, and you could even go as far as, you know, as like doing like a co-op career where you both work together. You have two cars, blah, 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 1 week. And, you know, maybe if you want to go full hardcore co-op mode, because co-op could be doable, very doable, like a 2-player co-op.
That's what I was thinking more along the lines of. I wasn't even thinking like the actual, like, you know, big races. I was thinking more of the co-op.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of kind of maybe having like a hybrid system of in between, like, say you could get with two, you know, you could do a 2-player team or like maybe a 4-player team. But I was looking at it from the aspect of like, you're doing, you and your buddy or a few of your buddies are like building a team together. And maybe you start off and you as your two buddies could only afford one car. So one guy's racing and the other guy's doing the crew chiefing and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And then like, as you go along, you have the option to build, you know, you have the option to get another car, and you have the option to hire crew chiefs and pit crews for both of them. And you start working your way up like that. But I also like where your head's at with the doing it with like maybe a multiplayer race online, but you have to use like your team cars from what you build, like doing those other races. I think like a hybrid system in between would be kind of cool. Cause I wasn't even thinking about, I was thinking more of it just like doing it as like a co-op kind of career mode. Dude. But if you could merge the two and like actually, you know, make it to where like it's not like iRacing where you essentially just run the car. It's not costing you anything other than obviously the real money to own the car. But like you're actually having to do like, maybe you have the option to do like races against AI, and that's how you build your team up. And then when you get to a certain point, and obviously you qualify for these bigger classes when you're running, you know, or it doesn't matter what class it is, as long as you have the car, you can get in, but you're like still using the money that you acquire from those races. You can build your team that way.
when you think about it, is like your small street stock is like your like dirt oval is going to be your most competitive in terms of like car part design and stuff like that, of like different intakes and stuff like that. And I mean, it's still rule guided, and that's where you could balance your online for your actual racing. If you did do that, like you could have where you could import your single player co-op car into a race weekend online.
Yeah.
And so you could pull your car over, and whoever sets up the lobby or league or whatever would set the tech requirements. So it'd be like, you can't have this, you can't have this, you can't have this. That way everyone would still be in the balance of, you're not going to have one guy that puts up 400 hours in the game with a guy that put 4.
Yeah.
And the guy with 4, there's no way he's going to compete with that 400 guy. The 400 guy is going to have to adjust his car to fit the league that the 4-hour guy is able to fit into. And if the 4-hour guy's car is lacking in that league, maybe you should find an easier league.
Exactly.
But it wouldn't be like a landslide, but that's how it is in real life. The cheap cars can't keep up with your RCR Hendrix cars and stuff like that. Is your independent struggle. But then you get ARCA and stuff like that, where they're like, everyone's using the same frame and the same motor and stuff like that, and it all has to be in a guideline.
Yeah, it comes down to the setup of the car for the race.
That could be cool though, because then during the week you can tweak on your car and do offline races and develop your team and play offline. But then every other Sunday I'm going to race with Joe and the other guys in the beer league. Right. And then you bring your car over that you've been putting time. You don't have to do a whole nother game. Yeah,
or even have like online competitive, like that the game itself just has like, like iRacing does, basically like, they have the time slots for the races, and obviously you get rating points and build up like that. But instead of it being like rating points, like obviously there would be some sort of rating system, that way you don't get people to just go in and wreck out. Like obviously you're not going to be able to compete.
Like a driver card.
Right.
Associated with your driver, this many race starts, this many wins, this many whatever.
But I think that in those races that even the game sets up, or like even if you do it with like an online league, there should be a way that you can like make money for your team doing it. Whether like everybody's has to buy in, and then there's a prize pool set up for it. Or, or even the game simulated ones. It's like you have to spend $1,000 to get into this race, but the top 3 drivers, you get a $10,000 prize pool, and that's going to go into your, go into your team. So it should all be interconnected. I think it's a really cool idea.
But I think the co-op would be really cool, because if you really wanted to do the true hard start, like say you and me decided to do a 2-player mode, is like the first couple races, we got our junker car, but one, you can divide and conquer the car. Right. And so, it'd be like, oh, we need this. Joe runs to the junkyard while I'm working on whatever, the suspension, assembling a suspension or whatever, which takes a little bit of time, or repairing parts with however the method is. Or I'm going to go look at a car part shop while you go to the junkyard, and we're going to compare prices.
Yeah.
To figure out which way is the better way. And then, for the first race or so, maybe you're the driver and then I'm the spotter. And then the next race we alternate until we get a second car. Once we get a second car, we could either go to a different class with the second car and we both race on our own, or we run in the same class and race on the track at the same time, which then you get the team racing, which would be really cool.
Yeah. And I think that like, if you did the co-op thing, I think you should be able to bring it to like an online, like where you're just racing against other people. But like you said, for example, we go into a race weekend and we're racing for like $10,000 or whatever. Yeah. I'm spotting for you. We have a third dude that's one of our buddies that's the crew chief.
Yeah.
And then it actually turns into like an actual race where you're like communicating with each other, and like the spotter seeing something, you're telling the crew chief as a driver what you feel, and he's making decisions. And then, like you said, obviously you get to the point where you have like AI in those spots that are doing a better job. Essentially, they have better, thought processes behind it. And then like all three of you are racing on the same track at the same time, but you're all the drivers. So, I mean, like it could be really fun to work up to that point.
Yeah. Cause I feel like, and I mean, that's something that would obviously have to be figured out, as like, when you're talking about individual control of things, is like, are we going to give people control down to like the Jackman and stuff like that? If so, then you got to look at potentially introducing mini games, which is either yay or nay for a lot of people, which some people like, some people hate, and they have to be done really well or else they feel stupid. And then you kind of take away from the management aspect, because AI can be really good, but at the end of the day, a human that knows how to game the game and play the buttons just right will always beat the AI, which is sometimes a good thing. But at the same time, what if you run into the issue where like a human can't compete with the AI? Then everyone's going to be like, what's the point of having an AI Jackman or a human Jackman if the AI is always going to be faster?
Yeah.
And I mean, you'd lose the errors. You wouldn't make mistakes as much. But I think there would have to be definitely a balance. 2-player would definitely work. 3-player, potentially, like you said, because you can add the crew chief on top of a spotter. And he could manage, your pit windows and stuff like that for you over the radio. You can be like, hey, we're going to need 2 tires. And he has access to the quote menu where he's setting it up and you're picking which set of tires you're going to use, because like we said, with the whole part aspect of the game is the lower end. If you're not NASCAR, you're having to buy your tires. So you're like, oh, well, we got this set that we've been saving and we're running really good right now. We need to run this set, not this set. And, this set's got more wear on it or whatever. And you're trying to balance it. And I know that's not necessarily like real life on every aspect, but in some cases that could be the cool thing where the crew chief's like, we got this, or like, hey, I busted my bumper and, he's looking through the inventory of what y'all have in the truck for a bumper and setting it up for the pit stop where it's ready to go and equip on the car and things like that. But I mean, it's things that could be figured out. Let's see. Obviously, I think it would be a PC game.
Yeah, I think PC. I mean, you could make the argument that it could be on console too. I mean,
I think the control scheme would be simple enough.
Would you want, I guess VR, I think would be kind of hard, maybe for the driving part of it, but like,
VR for driving would probably be the simplest. It's anything else would be really hard, I would think.
I mean, spotting would be kind of cool in VR if you could like hold a set of binoculars and have a radio.
I think VR.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, like, you could do console too. I mean, I don't know. I feel like again, PC would probably be a better fit for it. But
now, would it
console,
be
I think,
like
could
a
work.
more serious crowd, or do you think it's a good mix here? I feel like it could be a mix if you did it right.
I think it's in between, because like you're saying, like you could do it as hardcore as you wanted to, or you could do it as casual as you wanted to too, right? Like you could be like, I just want to drive. I don't want to manage the crew or whatever. So you just put people in charge of that. Or you can be like, I want to do it all. So like, I'm going to try to make the decisions for everything. So
exactly.
It can be either way.
And then, I mean, I think the game would sell because you're going out of a niche of iRacing, which is kind of my thought behind it, is you're not going to be just attracting the iRacing crowd anymore. You're going to be looking at your management guys, your guys that play like the Madness career modes, the GM modes is usually what they call it. The general manager owner modes is they're going to like the number management, because there was a game that came out a little while ago. It's like a Formula One game that takes place in the 70s where all it is you're managing your drivers and your team. And a lot of people play that. And I think this gives more of a scope to it than just that. Is like, if you're like, man, I don't feel like driving this week, and you're doing the co-op mode, then you can be like, Joe, you're gonna drive this week. I don't feel like driving. I'll just be a crew chief or spotter or whatever, or work on cars back at the shop, or however you do it. And obviously there's a lot of polishing that would have to be done in this concept, because there's a lot of dynamics in different directions of where you would tighten up things, like, can someone stay back at the shop and work on next week's car while y'all are at the race weekend? That's where you kind of run into these potential hurdles or challenges that you'd have to overcome as a developer. Because if we go to race weekend, is that going to force anyone that's in the shop to the race weekend? If they're like, man, I'm working on this car, I've got a lot to do on it for the next race tomorrow, can you stay behind? Because I know it's a funny game to bring up, but there was a game that came out a while ago, and it's one of those games that the internet probably wishes it forgot, was called Diesel Brothers, the game. With Diesel Dave. And it had a multiplayer aspect where you could work on trucks together. And you could change rooms. And I think if I remember right, it'd be kind of like our teleport system that we discussed. It's like you could have someone go to the junkyard while they were working on the truck, but I think it forced both players to move.
Okay.
But if you're using these teleports in the cells, like I was saying, it's like you could be in the shop and then someone else could go to the junkyard. You should be able to do that. No problem. And then the time just advances like normal. But the actual race weekend would be the big hurdle, is if you go to the race weekend, does everyone have to go? I feel like it's kind of a yes, because there's going to be so much in the game having to go on to manage the race weekend versus the other one.
Yeah, I agree.
and the time frame's going to pass differently and everything else with that. But I mean, I think that's kind of the pitch, though.
Yeah.
I mean, so what's your final thoughts on it, Joe?
I like it. I think it would be different, and I think that it would kind of like solidify whatever itch you have going on, right? If you're like, I want to drive, I want to spot, I want a crew chief, I want to manage this, manage that. And I think it would be fun too, like if, you know, you had more, if you had a 2-player co-op versus you had like 6 people on the same team or whatever, like having all your buddies get in and like take a different role, or eventually get to the point where everybody's driving a car and you got 4 cars on the track or whatever. Like, I think that it's kind of that you're building on a team. It's what like games like ATS are good at, stuff like that, where you're just constantly like, the drive of the game is to make the money and expand your crew, expand what you can do. And then it brings more money in and allows you to like advance in the game. I think it'd overall be fun.
One aspect we completely spaced on with this: damage.
Oh yeah.
Realistic damage option versus cosmetic. I feel like damage has to be a part of this game, because I feel like if you're racing dirt track and you take the nose of your car off, guess what? You're spending that next week trying to fix that nose.
Yeah.
You're getting parts and repair and doing chassis repair.
Yeah.
Or else you're going to have to get another chassis.
I think, yeah, if you have the option to fix it, like you should be able to fix it. Obviously, it's not going to like the durability on that part's not going to be 100% as if it were a new part. But then like if you're a lower end team, you're not just going to like build a new car.
No,
you're going to try to like fix the body panels and stuff like that. But
I think early you would have to have some forgiveness, maybe, you know, because cars are relatively safe now. But I mean, you look at like your cup teams and stuff like that, it's nothing for them to throw a chassis in the garbage.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you're a small dirt track guy, you know, demolition derby level repairs, your car gets rear-ended pretty hard. You're going to be banging out quarter panels with a sledgehammer.
Right.
Because that's what you got to do. And maybe that's what you have to do early on. And, you know, you just, you have to balance it in a way, maybe a hidden like background management where early on in the game, because the last thing you want to do is total out your car at the beginning of the game and have a bad wreck.
Right.
And then you're like, well, crap, now I got to basically start over. So I think maybe your early class cars are a little bit more forgiving in the beginning. Maybe as the game progresses in time, it naturally increases like the damage difficulty to like where once you get a second car, then you have a chance of really totaling out a car if you try hard enough. But I think it would be better. Yeah, you have your physical visible damage and you can repair panels and stuff like that with a sledgehammer, or if you have the money, you can replace them. But I think it's a durability hit on top of the cosmetic. It's like, so if your car's at 70%, you take a bad impact, it drops it down to like 40%. You can still bang it out and run it, but it's going to be rough week to keep that car on the track.
Oh yeah. And I think too, if you're going to introduce the multiplayer, like online competitive racing stuff where you're competing for money for your team, then I think that you should have like full damage on, because then it's going to, you're not just going to send the car in there and race crazy. Yeah, you're going to actually have people that are like cautious about how they race and, you know, and I think, not want to wreck their stuff.
I think the way you fix the early levels, though, especially if you're talking like dirt track, like taking old cars and turning them into race cars, is you just make the junkyard bodies where they're realistically priced, like back when it would be in the 90s. So like you wreck your Monte Carlo, you go to the junkyard, you find another Camaro, it's $500, but it's just a shell, and you move all your stuff over to that body. And it's just unfortunately the way it goes sometimes if you lose your chassis, because obviously that's your most catastrophic thing to lose is a chassis, and that or the motor. But again, you blow your motor on a bad week, you go to junkyard and get another one. It may not be as good as your old one, but you might be able to salvage a lot of the upper end or stuff like that didn't go nuclear. You just might have lost your block. So you just got to go find a block.
Yeah.
And that's where that, I think the parts management mechanic side of it's really cool, because you're going to be upset, but you're not out of the race. Like you could balance out the junkyard. I think the junkyard would be your key, because once you get into like the upper races, like your NASCAR level stock car racing, you should have enough money where it takes a hit, but you should be able to keep the car going. You'll probably have a spare motor at that point for that type of class. Or if not, then you should have a spare car running a different class. You can run for a week or two to make the money, or you can hot seat or something like that to make your money back. like quick jobs in ATS, where if you really need money, you go do a quick job and make a quick buck and get back in the car.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's where, because it's like you said, like especially in multiplayers, you feel more protective of the car. You're not going to make the stupid choice unless it's like it's either this or losing.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You're not just going to be playing bumper cars all the time unless you got stupid money and you don't have anything better to do. But
yeah,
you may go to the junkyard that week and there may not be a body for you, and so you have to skip that race weekend and wait till the next week for a car to appear. And then you miss out on points or whatever, or sponsorship opportunity. And it's the way it is. Cause I feel like the simulator aspect has to be there. And sure, we could have assist and things that make things maybe like auto manage this, auto manage that. But I think the game, I don't want it to feel like an arcade where it's like, oh, it's not a big deal. I'll just respawn and go back in and restart the race. Like, I want you to feel like you lose it.
Yeah.
And maybe you can do a percentage slider where it's like, instead of 100% damage, it's 50% damage. So the damage isn't as painful on the car when I do screw up. So maybe less experienced people, it's more forgiving too. But I think turning the damage completely off negates the whole point of the game, because then you're not going to have part wear and you're not going to have to manage your motors and, have them built, and maybe you can send motors off to engine builders or whatever. And they'll, like they do in NASCAR now, where you send them off to RCR or whoever, and they'll send you a motor back before the next race, or it'll be at the track waiting for you to drop in. And you can have things like that where, maybe eventually you get a motor contract where you can just, they supply motors for you.
Right.
And then you don't have to worry about motors anymore if you don't want to.
Exactly.
And suspension, have a suspension guy or a shop you send it to, and they send you a roller and you drop your motor in it because your shop's a motor shop. You build really good motors and you got really good staff. And then, like I said, we could go on ever with breaking down the individual mechanics, because you could make it very detailed and very fun.
Oh yeah.
Where you can kind of play the game how you want. And I think that's the key to the game that's going to sell it to people, is the playability of being able to play any way you want. Like you said, if you want to just drive. If you want to own a team. If you just want a crew chief. It's how you want to play the game, but it's still a simulator.
Exactly.
And you still have that iRacing feel where, you feel the cars feel right. They sound right. If we did the AI or voiceovers or whatever, where the AI can respond to you even better. I think the rivalry concept, that's cool, where you could have team reputation with everyone. And, maybe teams get eliminated over time where, if a team does bad, they eventually drop off because they're out of money.
Right.
Then you have a leaderboard or standings. You have your race league standings, your points, but like you can look at a leaderboard, this team's down to $10,000 because they've had 5 bad weeks. And, you may not like that team and you wreck them out that weekend just to take out their last $10,000. It's just the way it is. And then you poach their crew now on the market. And you could play games like that. You could play a dirty team if you wanted to.
Well, I think too, like this kind of goes back into the multiplayer stuff now that I think about it. Like, if you say you just want to be a crew chief, and I don't know how you would use your money if you were a crew chief, or you could eventually be a crew chief or a spotter and like work your way up to build your own team. But here's a thought too, like if there's like an online competitive scene, let's say like so-and-so is like, has a team, they have a car or whatever, and they're looking for a crew chief or looking for a spotter because they don't want to use an AI one, or they want to be more competitive. Like, let's just say like, you've been playing the game for a while and you're like, I'll go be a spotter for somebody. Maybe there's some sort of like panel in the game that you can basically like put out an ad for like, hey, I'm looking for a crew chief. And then some guy can respond to it and be like, I'll crew chief your race or your team for X amount of money that they pay that person. It would be kind of cool too. So you can hire people, other players of the game, to like work for your team that you may not even know. Would be kind of cool too.
Yep. But
so there are a bunch of
I think that's the framework. Like I said, it's one of those things that could be expanded on so much or decreased upon so much. But I think the concept's there. Do you think it would be an indie studio, or would it have to be a AAA type big studio?
I mean,
honestly, just keep in mind, I think it was either Crimson Desert or Windrose had a studio of 50 people and made what it did, which is not a big studio by any means.
In today's world, I think that indie development is far better than AAA quality nowadays.
I think a passionate indie studio that had some race backing, either, a Dale Jr. type or something like that was interested in the project and could give them the insight.
Yeah.
Like a team owner type insight, or the resources like sound engineering to be able to record cars, scan tracks, whatever it is. Because I think this game would be very important to focus on like the small tracks, because I don't know if you've noticed there's been a big resurgence of small tracks coming back out.
Yeah.
I know Missouri passed a law recently protecting racetracks from being developed over.
Oh, wow.
They actually passed a thing where they can't claim nuisance sound now for tracks that are already there a certain amount of time.
Nice.
And so it's protecting tracks. And I'm seeing a lot of old tracks open. I mean, we got the Rockingham back last year. We got a lot of these small dirt tracks are finding new owners. I think a lot of it, I mean, I'll say this, this is kind of a side note in this podcast, but like the Cletus McFarland effect, they're calling it, is they see what Cletus has managed to do with the Freedom Factory. So these small track owners are realizing if they put the effort in, they have a chance of succeeding.
Yeah.
Because they're getting attention with gimmick races like the Crown Vics and stuff like that, where people are like, oh, there's a point in this. Yep. And we can save it, and people are finding interest in it. And if the tracks make it reasonable, but I think a game like this could really showcase these small, tracks, is go out to these small tracks, the flow racing type tracks that aren't on the NASCAR circuits, and get a good scans of these and drop these in the game and let people run the small tracks. Then you have people like, oh, that's the track I go to. Like there's one 15 minutes away from me, a small track, and it's nice, but it's just a small clay oval. But I think in the game too, is you have to have, your clays, but at the same time you can get in the asphalt if you want, or tarmac. And so you can go into, your basic late models, super late models, pro late models, all that, and run asphalt. And then, you have your Bristol type where you can run, sometimes they run dirt, sometimes they run asphalt. And it just depends on the thing. And I think having the schedules where you have, I think a big thing for this game is having as many classes as you can shove into this game feasible.
Yeah.
The more classes, the better. And I know it can be overwhelming to people. I mean, obviously you don't want to get too redundant with like micro class changes and stuff like that, but like have all your bigs, your modifieds, your different levels, like your pro and super late models, your pro and super modifieds and all that. And then it's basically your skill levels, and then you get into like crate motors and stuff like that, where you have to have sealed crate motors from the manufacturer versus just a built stock motor. And it can really go far, but I mean, that's it. So would you say sell it or shelve it?
I would say sell it. I think if you found the right studio with passionate people that were into racing and liked the idea, I think it would be a total sell.
I think 100% it would have to be like you said, a small studio that actually likes racing and wants a racing game, because the amount of staff that would interact with it, and the possibility of like slapping your production team into the game as crew members, just, the Easter egg of the crew being in the game as different crew members or crew chiefs or whatever would be cool. Yeah. And, they would want to get the recording, and especially when you're talking about the small track stuff, it wouldn't be that hard to find someone. You go on Facebook and post, hey, does anyone have a super late model we can record some sounds off of one week? And then you set up cameras on it and get the sounds and make it sound good. And then, whether you do AI or actual voiceovers, I'm sure AI nowadays, even though it's a polarizing topic, some people love it, some people hate it. I think it's a valuable tool for some studios, especially small studios, is in terms of the voices. It's not even like recording AI voiceovers. It's creating that AI agent that will respond to your voiceover, is something that you wouldn't be able to do without AI. Is you can't have a pre-recorded voiceover respond to your player asking a question. I mean, you could have like the prompting where it recognizes what you're saying and gives you a matching-ish response, but it would be repetitive after a while, because it would go, oh, well, if he's asking about two tires, it's going to be one of these two responses. Yeah. Whereas an AI would try and analyze it. And if you gave it the dictionary to pull from and everything, it would figure out what you're asking really quick and do it. But it would be more of a performance intensive game for sure.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I would say sell it too. So, I mean, that's kind of it for the episode.
Yeah.
Let us know down in the comments what anyone listening thinks about it. What would you do different? What would you do? And also, if you have any ideas for a game, we will come up with a method really soon, probably for the next one, that you could submit game ideas for us to look at. Maybe an email or something like that we can set up. I might put it in the description for the podcast once it's up, with an email or something along that line. So if you have an idea for a game you want to pitch, you can send it to that email or Discord or however I decide to set it up. And maybe if we like the idea, we'll bring you on the show or pitch your idea between us and see where we go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every game we've done so far, we've always said sell it. But
yeah,
it'd be interesting to find a game
that we can get a divisive. And I'd like to get some games outside of our genres. Obviously, we have our passionate genres, you know, whether it be Sims or racing or whatever like that. I'd like to see some different ideas. I'd like to see someone come and give me an action game or a puzzle game, even something different that I'm not thinking that I have to think about. I'd love to hear someone pitch it and us ask them questions and figure out if we like it. And yeah, but that's going to be it for this podcast. Hopefully we get the next one out sooner than later, but they're just going to kind of come out as we come up with ideas and get time. But again, that'll be it. Until next time, everyone. Talk to y'all later.